organized crime rings. So I think Damian Williams is stating it pretty clearly and correctly that the Southern District of New York would be on anyone's top list of units of government agencies that would be able to handle something like this with a celebrity and the complexities and the number of witnesses, because it is such a elite and heavy conviction centered prosecution unit.
Look, the indictment and the bail letter that was put forward by the prosecution, serious accusations. I mean, disturbing to say the least. And even though we don't know all the evidence, and we're going to get into some of it, they seem to be very confident in their case. But it also, we didn't know how many victims there were. It seems that one of the charges is at least with respect to just one victim. Racketeering cases can be complicated. But saying that, do you feel that this is a strong case based on the allegations put forward?
Yeah, this is one of the strongest sex trafficking cases that I've ever seen.
And that's where I have issue at the moment. She says, and an experienced attorney, she's saying this is one of the strongest sex trafficking cases she has ever seen. But my question is based on what evidence so far? Remember, the Southern District of New York have had over 6 months with the evidence at the moment, right? And she's explained that the Southern Districts of New York are the best team to deal with all of this. But at the moment, she's saying this is the strongest evidence. The evidence they've provided is the strongest she's ever seen. Now, I'm only basing this on the 3 counts we've seen and how they've been presented. Let me just continue a little bit. Let her continue a little bit here.
The indictment was not as detailed as I was expected, and there were some allegations that I suspected might be made that were not, such as, underage victims or, perhaps murder or, things like that. This was focused enough and had enough meat that I feel like it'll be very difficult, to sort of get out of these allegations.
All right, so and that's another thing that's bothered me with this case at the moment. And I'm not saying that Puff Daddy isn't guilty of these charges the indictments or the charges that have been leveled against him. But you hear her here saying, I've always seen, she mentions she was expecting, it was not as detailed as it should have been. She was expecting to hear underage stuff and murder. Seems quite disappointed maybe that that's not the case, but that hasn't been brought yet against him. And, I would have to ask why that is the case at the moment, considering that they've had the best division has been on the case for 6 months. And this is the indictment. So at the moment, what is going around on the internet, there's always allusions to Epstein, R. Kelly. I've heard a lot of murders and things like that, blackmail, but there's been no specific, in the indictments, there's been no specific instance of blackmail at the, that has been brought so far. But as I said, in the press, it seems as if they have been brought and have been proven. She says it's the strongest evidence she's ever seen. Let's go into another YouTube clip. It's from Hip Hop Uncensored. They're covering this quite extensively. And some of the... let's go into they interviewed an attorney in America, a very experienced attorney called Al Shabazz, I think it is. Let me find the clip in which she refers to the fact that the Southern District of New York took their time. They didn't rush with the indictments. But let's listen to what she says. Sorry, there's going to be a delay here. It's a long... I can't explain to you why, but there might be a little bit of lag and delay while these things are loading up. But just bear with me. We'll get there. All right, so this is the attorney.
They set it off. They didn't rush to the grand jury. We haven't got... They did the search warrant back in March of 2024. Mm-hmm. We didn't know that they got 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers back in March. We just learned that yesterday, or day before yesterday, whenever the indictment was unsealed, right?
Right.
We just learned that. I think that this indictment is only the first. What we will see is a superseding indictment, which will have probably a great deal more counts.
All right, again, so at the moment, as it stands, irrespective of what you might be hearing online. The indictments haven't been fleshed out, or the charges against him haven't been leveled out in the way that I personally thought they would have been leveled out, considering the length of time that they've had to bring these charges against him, and considering their expertise. But maybe it's the way the Southern District of New York work, all right? But I'd have assumed with the video evidence that they've had, and there would be more meat on the charges, on the indictment, but there isn't. And as Shabazz here says, she expects there to be she expects there to be some more charges. Now, let's go back into Hip Hop DX and just to explain how he's been portrayed, P Diddy. They make a good point here, and let's listen to what is said here.
They're pretty much accusing this dude of being a monster.
Yeah.
Nothing short of a monster, forcing men and women to do sexual acts. You know, how do you gather evidence besides somebody just saying something? What type of evidence could you have besides just words, somebody eyewitness account?
Yeah, well, this person, because he's a narcissist and it was his desire to have evidence to use against the people who participated in these acts, he stored a lot of video evidence. And in March 2024, when they hit the door and they executed those warrants, they got a lot of video evidence. So not only do they have the video evidence that he kept, they have video evidence from other witnesses who were there so they got people who were there who witnesses. They're going to come testify, and they also have what those people will come say. They will have that stuff the testimony corroborated by video evidence, right? Because what did he say when
All right, so hold on a second. So again, she's sort of suggesting that there are parts in the indictment that actually are not there yet. Yes, they have video evidence, but there's a suggestion of blackmail. There's no specific instance of blackmail in the indictment. The way she presents it is as if there is this, they already have this, and that's part of the counts. I can tell you right now, it isn't. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. They've got to individually prove the charges. The way it's been presented and the way she's presenting it is as if that's already been done, and that's.
He filed the lawsuit. All of these allegations are untrue. And then when the video dropped, he's like, "Oh, I was in a dark place."
Right.
So,
All right. I stopped that at the wrong place, really. But let me just explain something to you. We all know the reason why I'm a bit concerned with the evidence that's being presented against him at the moment is that they had this amount of time, and there's reliance on this 1,000 bottles of baby oil. Now, the oil thing is really nothing. That's what first sparked my interest, to be honest. Like, why are we so concerned about 1,000 bottles of oil? What's that got to do with the crimes he's supposed to have committed? You understand? There's the thin line between having orgies, being freaky as he is, and committing crimes in a controlled enterprise in the manner in which the allegations are being leveled against him. What's the deal with the 1,000 bottles of oil? Why was that specified? Apart from to cause, sensationalize the whole thing. I mean, I've seen memes, and to be honest, they're quite funny. I've seen quite a lot of funny memes online, about with the oil. But is that what you've got? Is that why not give us the specifics of the blackmailing and the people? You understand? That's why it didn't rest comfortably with me when they relied on the 1,000 bottles of oil. Also, the AR-15s. Now, from my research, having a defaced AR-15 or a defaced weapon is a federal crime. Okay, why hasn't he been indicted for that as well? I just don't understand why he hasn't. But they mention it. So I think, okay, why are they mentioning it? Is that to skew public perception? Is that because, as I said, now we all feel he's guilty of these crimes. He had this enterprise where he controlled and forced people into these sexual parties and so on and so forth. With the level of how the indictment has been put forward, why is there no charge on the AR-15s? Now, I'm not saying they're not going to come, but I'm just saying that at the moment, it seems as if the prosecution are doing everything they can to prove his guilt to the public, and we are taking it at face value. Do you understand? It's being suggested he blackmailed. I haven't seen the indictment yet. Another thing that bothered me was I think his homes were raided in March, and not very long after, the Cassie videos came out, and the Cassie video was disgusting. There's nobody who didn't watch this stuff that wasn't disgusted with his behavior. Like, wow, I remember watching it and thinking, wow, how can you beat a woman like that? He is truly evil, a bad man. And he's definitely guilty of crimes, right? But my question was, why did they release this at that time? Is that to, could it be to sway public perception? Could it be to sway public perception? Because it definitely contributed in how we looked at Puffy. When that video came out, all of a sudden it was like, whoa, this is definitely too much. This guy is the devil. All right, so is that a case where, and how was it released? I'm not sure how it was released. I'm certain, I don't know, I'm not saying, but
You don't find that suspicious?
that suddenly that came out, and from that moment he was under pressure, because that's when he came out and apologized for it. Now we've got to be careful, irrespective of how much we don't like Puff Daddy or how much you don't like Puff Daddy, that there is justice, that the rule of law is followed, that, and as I've said, under the one of the oldest and foundational principles of human rights law and law in general is the presumption of innocence. A man is presumed innocent until he's proven guilty. You don't prove somebody's guilty by social media, by people just saying, oh, the evidence is there, oh yes, he's done it, before he's even had a trial. And the reason why it's important is that we have to just be a little bit, let's look at what the evidence is for what it is and what he's been charged. As I said, I certainly know he's committed, we've seen it, he's committed crimes, definitely. If he's forced people into prostitution, into forced sex, into all these things that he's been accused of, then he should go down, absolutely. But it is the duty of the prosecution to prove that in court, not on social media, not to sway your perception as to what the truth is. Because remember, he's going to be tried by a jury, and the jury will have to come with an open mind, because they have to understand that it is the duty of the prosecution to prove the charges to the extent in which they have brought them. All right? Now, just to explain or to ram home this whole point of the presumption of innocence, let's look into a few cases, and I'm just going to rush through these. It's not going to take a lot of time. Now, in American law, there's a case called Coffin versus the United States, and this is one of the foundational cases that they have that relies on the presumption of innocence. And let's just look at what that case was about. Now, the Coffin brothers, along with other defendants, were accused of engaging in fraudulent banking practices. They were charged with defrauding a bank by misapplying funds, essentially stealing money from the bank for personal benefit. Now, during the trial, the defense requested that the judge explicitly instruct the jury that the defendants were presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The trial judge refused to give such an instruction. The Coffin brothers were convicted, and they appealed the conviction on the grounds that the jury was not properly instructed about the presumption of innocence. The key issue in the case was whether or not the trial court erred by failing to explicitly instruct the jury that the defendants were presumed innocent and that the government bore the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the conviction and ruled that the presumption of innocence is a long-standing principle rooted in common law, which must be explicitly explained to the jury in criminal trials. The court's opinion, written by Justice White, emphasized that the presumption of innocence is a vital protection for defendants and lies at the heart of the American criminal justice system. The prosecution always has the burden to prove guilt, and the defendant is not required to prove their innocence. And again, this is my point in relation to Puff Daddy. the prosecution have to prove his guilt, not him proving his innocence. Now let's go into a case called, this is in the UK. It's a case called Wilmington versus DPP. It was held in 1935. It's called the Golden Thread case. I'll explain that. Now, Wilmington and Violet was his wife, had separated, and she moved back to live with her mother. In an effort to win her back, Wilmington visited her with a shotgun. He claimed he had planned to frighten her into returning to him, but in the process, the shotgun accidentally went off, killing her. Wilmington was charged with murder. The key issue was whether Wilmington had to prove that the shooting was an accident or whether it was the prosecution's duty to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he had intentionally murdered his wife. At the time, there's a prevailing legal rule that in certain cases such as murder, once the prosecution proved the killing, the burden shifted to the defendant that the killing was accidental or justified. So the burden would shift to the defendant that the killing was justified. So once the murder had been established, burden of proof shifts. Okay, during the trial, the judge instructed the jury that once the prosecution proved that Wilmington had killed his wife, it was up to him to prove it was an accident, effectively reversing the burden of proof. Wilmington was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. He appealed to the House of Lords, the highest court in the UK at the time. Now, the House of Lords overturned Wilmington's conviction, and the principle of this case is the Lords ruled that the prosecution always bears the burden of proving the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and this applies to every element of the crime, including intent. The burden of proof does not shift to the defendant, even in cases where a killing is admitted. All right? That makes it quite clear. Now, this Viscount Sankey, delivering the judgment, made the famous statement, and this is the golden thread statement. Throughout the web of the English criminal law, one golden thread is always to be seen. That is, it is the duty of the prosecution to prove the prisoner's guilt. If at the end of and on the whole of the case there is reasonable doubt created by the evidence given by either the prosecution or the prisoner, the prosecution has not made out the case and the prisoner is entitled to an acquittal. And finally, I'm going to come to a European case, a case that was held not too long ago, well, a few years ago, in the European Court of Human Rights, and it's called Bavka versus Slovenia. It was actually last year. And in this case, Igor Bavka, sorry, I haven't pronounced it well. If you know how to pronounce it, please let me know in the comments below. A former Slovenian government minister was convicted of money laundering. The case became controversial when the Slovenian justice minister made public statements during a televised interview implying Bavka's guilt before his appeal process had concluded. Bavka had been convicted of money laundering in 2016, but his sentence was delayed due to health issues. During this time, the Minister of Justice in a public interview made statements implying that Bavka was guilty and criticized the delays in his case, stating that heads would roll if it became time-barred. Now, I think the camera's gone off here. Just bear with me. Somebody also, please, if you can tell me how I can stop this from happening, but I'll be back on screen shortly. But anyway, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that the presumption of innocence was indeed violated by the minister's statements. Public officials must refrain from making statements that imply guilt before legal proceedings are complete, particularly in high-profile cases. The court found that these remarks could prejudice the fairness of ongoing judicial proceedings and impact the impartiality of the courts. Now, just in case you're curious, that's what the guy looks like in real life. Now, again, this boils down to what I'm talking about, the presumption of innocence. It is a cardinal and foundational part of human rights law, of law in general. And we have to be careful not to rush the gun. Yes, we all have this, what we've seen Puff Daddy do, especially to Cassie, is completely out of bounds, and he should be punished for that. Those are crimes there, but we have to be careful that we watch and make sure that we are not being swayed by what people are saying online, and all the jokes and the memes to presume that he's already guilty of something that maybe the prosecution have yet to prove. I mean, they haven't proved anything yet. what they are reciting are the counts or the charges against him. And you can come here, I've heard when they bring a charge, it's 95% sure that they'll win the case. Okay, if it's 95%, what about the 5%? We're talking about 1 in 20. So is 1 in 20 not a percentage? Even if it was 99 out of 100, there's one that might slip through the net. And there's a reason why we have to be careful as to how we perceive the case, what we hear, and how we form our judgment. So let's please stick to the evidence. Let's stick to the evidence and leave the prosecution to prove the case. I'll go back to the to Al-Shabazz and this presumption, and this will sort of round up exactly what I'm trying to say here. Let's see what she says here. It's a bit of a delay, but hopefully this will.
Because Diddy is innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely, he is presumed. He is presumed innocent. Absolutely.
Right. And due process has to take place. But in our opinion, is this done? Is this over? Because it seems like in the court of public opinion, this dude is already buried under the jail.
Yeah.
And like you just alluded to, it may be some things outside of all of our imaginations, some serious things going on that we aren't privy to even know about. So is this trial or is this situation with Diddy done before it even started, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think he's done.
And there we go. And that's why we've got to be careful. That's why I say we've got to be careful. We've got to be careful as to how we look at the case, how we perceive what people are telling us. She's an experienced attorney. She's saying from her own point of view that Diddy is already done. You've heard the other lady, I've forgotten her name now, I think Robin Nunn, or on the Law and Crime Network, saying it's the strongest evidence she's ever seen, but it's not panning out to what I am seeing. And therefore, we have to be careful that we do not jump on the bandwagon and assume that he's guilty of the charges that have been leveled against him with the evidence that they have provided. The duty is always on the prosecution to prove the case, not to prove it on social media or anything like that. Okay? Now, the whole phrase, a man is innocent until proven guilty, isn't just some fancy statement. It is the cardinal and foundational principle of law. And you should be concerned because it's all right when it happens to others. But if you don't pay attention, it could happen to you. And that's why you have to be able to be a bit critical with your thinking and just analyze it a little bit better. I'm not saying that he's not guilty again. I'm not saying I have no skin in the game. I have no concern about Puff Daddy. But we have to always bear that in mind, that a man is presumed innocent until he's proven guilty. Now, thank you indeed for sticking around. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Do you follow on YouTube? Well, like and subscribe at least, please. I'm grateful for you hanging out with me. This is second edition. I'll be back next week. It's been great. Thank you so much indeed. And catch you for. See you next time.